who should really be reaching for the Flir 5 Pro, who would be better off putting their money into a smartphone attachment, and does the price make sense for the everyday user who just wants a reliable way to see heat? That's the question I hear all the time when people dip their toes into thermal imaging. If you've ever stood on a roof at night trying to find a hot spot on an electrical panel, or you've tried to locate a pet that slipped under the couch and you can't see a thing, you know the frustration of guessing in the dark. On the other hand, you've also probably heard horror stories about cheap thermal cameras that give you a rainbow of nonsense, drain the battery in an hour, or require a PhD to figure out the menu. The Flir 5 Pro sits right in the middle of that conversation, and I'm going to walk through why it might be the sweet spot for some and a miss for others. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about what a thermal camera actually does for you in a real-world setting. It captures infrared radiation and translates it into a visual image that shows temperature differences. In practice, that means you can spot a failing circuit breaker without opening the panel, locate moisture behind a wall before you tear it down, or simply find a warm-blood animal in thick brush at dusk. Those are the scenarios that drive the need for a device like the E5 Pro, and they also shape the criteria you should be judging it by. Ease of use, confidence in the focus, how it behaves when the light is low or non-existent, how long the battery lasts, and whether the software ecosystem actually helps you troubleshoot or just adds another layer of complexity. The E5 Pro is built around Flir's Ignite cloud platform, which essentially gives you a way to store and share the images you capture without needing to shuttle a memory card back and forth. For a field technician, that can be a real time saver. You snap a thermal scan of a panel, the image uploads instantly to the cloud, and you can email a report to your supervisor while you're still on the job site. For a hobbyist who just wants to post a cool thermal picture on Instagram, the same cloud feature means you don't have to wrestle with file formats or third-party apps. The catch is that the cloud relies on Wi-Fi, so you need a decent connection to make the most of it. In a remote warehouse or a construction site with spotty reception, you might find yourself waiting for the upload to finish, which can be a minor annoyance. One of the biggest pain points people have with thermal cameras is focus. Older units often required you to manually adjust the lens or guess whether the image was sharp enough, which defeats the purpose when you're trying to quickly locate a hot spot. The E5 Pro uses a form of autofocus that, in my tests, locked onto a target within a second or two in most indoor and outdoor scenarios. When I pointed it at a running motor from 10 feet away, the thermal signature was crisp enough to see the exact bearing that was heating up. That level of confidence is a practical strength. You don't waste time fine-tuning the focus while the equipment you're diagnosing might be overheating. Low-light behavior is another area where the E5 Pro shines, simply because thermal imaging doesn't depend on visible light. However, the on-screen display is a standard LCD that can be hard to read under bright sunlight. If you're doing a daylight inspection on a roof, you'll need to angle the device away from the sun or squint a bit. That's not a flaw in the sensor, but it does affect usability. Users who spend most of their time in complete darkness like nighttime wildlife observers or electricians working in unlit basements will hardly notice the screen limitation. For people who need a device that works equally well in bright and dim conditions, a higher contrast display would be a welcome upgrade. Battery life on the E5 Pro is advertised as a full workday, and in practice I got about 7 hours of continuous shooting before the indicator turned amber. That's enough for a typical inspection route or a day of field work. But it's not a set-and-forget solution for someone who wants to leave the camera on a ladder overnight to monitor a heat leak. The battery is removable, which is a plus. You can carry a spare and swap it out without turning the unit off. Still, the charging time is around 2 hours, so you'll need to plan a charging window if you're rotating batteries. Stabilization isn't something you normally associate with thermal cameras, but the E5 Pro does have a basic electronic image stabilization that smooths out minor handshake. When I filmed a walkthrough of an industrial plant, the video held steady enough that the thermal gradients didn't blur into each other. That works well for walkthrough inspections, but if you're trying to capture a steady shot from a moving vehicle, you'll notice